Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast, where we are celebrating probably our best performance of the season. And we're going to discuss that today, along with Van de Ven's injury, Romero, the Mr. Reliable Man, Kulusevski. Can he do any more to win over the fans? And his letter about Ange Postecoglou. Johnson's finally clicking. Udogie's the beast. Sarr the magician. Does he have Real Madrid vibes all over him? Skip and Hill not making the bench. Are we going to win the league? Can we talk about that again? And the new FFP and PSR rules that have just been announced today. And with us to discuss it, we have Sai. How are you, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, really good. You good, Jim?
Doing very well, thanks. Been to the pub for a couple, got a glass of Reds.
Nice.
Their work, so yeah.
There you go.
All's going well. All's going well. Stu, how are you, mate?
Fantastic. How you doing?
Aren't we all? Wasn't that just amazing? I will dive into that a bit later. But Deej, and how are you, mate? Loving the shirt.
Thank you. This is the one I mentioned a couple episodes ago. This is my first kit that I've ever had. So,
and it still fits. Lovely.
Yeah.
And it's still...
I bought it really big when I got it with this in mind. Not necessarily this, but wearing it. But yeah, it was a good weekend, good win. Shame some other results didn't go our way, but
God,
all you can do is win what's in front of you.
Well, you carry on. What did you make of the game?
I thought that we played very well. I think that the first half, we obviously did the thing that we kind of have been doing in every game, which is have a lot of possession and not a lot of clear-cut chances. And then we offer up 2 or 3, decent counter-attacking opportunities that get mopped up by our center backs usually. And then we all at halftime kind of go, oh my God, this is like Conte all over again, and then we come out and we score relatively early in the second half. So, I think that our performance overall was really good. I don't know if best performance of the season is necessarily where I would go with it, because I do think that we definitely benefited by them having John McGinn just lose his head for no reason, really. And I mean, obviously, everyone on Twitter wants to have the opposite opinion of correct, and some people have said that it's not a red. It just is. It always has been. That's one of those that you look back. That's one of those tackles that you put on one of the the montages of proper Brexit tackles. That goes right in there with them.
Sunday League 101, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It is. That is the quintessential I am ready to shower tackle right there.
Devil's advocate, Deej, and this is proper devil's advocate, I have to say. I know he came storming across the pitch, with no intention but for anything else to wipe out Udogie, because he had just completely done 2 of his teammates, and it was like a child in the school ground. It was just I'm going to wipe you out. It wasn't at full speed. It didn't look to me like it was threatening to really harm the player. It's more like, I'm going to trip you up out of anger. Or am I being too jet?
No, it was a kick. It wasn't a trip, it was a kick.
Yeah, it was a kick.
It was like how I'd trip up my sibling when I'm 8 years old. And they're running away from me, and I just wipe them out.
Yeah, and you'd get a timeout.
Yeah, but the law
go straight to the corner.
The law states it's if you're endangering an opponent by your actions, whether you intend it or don't intend it, or whether you make contact or don't make contact. It's like he just went in there, the ball was gone, and he just took him out. It's a red all day long.
He didn't stick a foot out to trip him out. He literally just hacked at him.
He kicked him.
It was a petulant kick because he was frustrated.
All right.
I do think there's been a bit of a swing on Twitter that we should judge outcome instead of intent with Reds. And I think that's kind of the argument with this one, that Udogie kind of walked away basically unscathed. And that because Udogie was fine, obviously the tackle wasn't that dangerous. And so we should just kind of ignore everything that happened and just look at outcome, which I think is a really bad precedent to set, because that is how you increase the number of tackles that can have a negative outcome. Obviously, Udogie did not get injured for this, but there was no way John McGinn was worrying about that when he winded up and just went all the way through Udogie. That's an injury can happen in that situation. He could have caught him somewhere else. He could have caught him in the knee. That could have created issues. He could have landed wrong, because when you clear out both legs from someone, you can land and dislocate a shoulder really easily. There are so many ways that tackle could have gone horribly wrong, that we are fortunate that it didn't. but I think that it's a really bad idea to start judging those kind of tackles as like,
Yeah.
oh, well, he was fine, so who cares? We move on. I think that's a dangerous precedent to set.
Okay, so I've been universally outvoted by. Go on, shoot.
But the one positive thing I would say that came out from that was that I really loved the way Brennan Johnson reacted. We've been going on about, he's been pulling out of tackles, he needs to get stuck in. I thought last week, the goal assist that came from him, carrying on through a tackle. And again today, he was the first one there, fully in, like, I'm defending my teammate. I really like this new Brendan Johnson that we've got. And this is, the one thing that was lacking. If this is now on board, we're really going to get this wonderful class player that, we've been saying is clear to everyone that he's got the ability. Now, if he's got the mindset, sky's the limit.
Yeah, and it does feel like he's got really stuck into all the shit housing this season. I remember that Madison with the darts, and he clearly does care. We wanted to see a bit more grit from himself during the game, didn't we? And he's really showing that now, and he's taking players on and trying to dribble past them now. And Si, from your perspective, performance, was I being overly generous to call it our best performance of the season?
Well, I'm not sure if it's our best performance, but I think it's our most controlled performance from across 90 minutes. I think it's the most professional that we've been, and it's been, whilst the first half was maybe a little bit uninspiring, as some first halves that we've had this season have been, and then the second half we did what we tend to do, is score goals in braces, and take advantage of when teams are a bit discombobulated, But I think that we kept the ball so well in the first half. We put them under pressure. They lined up a 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2, depending on whether they're attacking or defending. But we didn't let them ever have five in midfield because the press was initiated so effectively. And you could see it as well, that when one person initiated the press, everybody knew what to do. So you had Johnson on the left that was splitting the right hand side centre half and the right back. They had no way out there, and the same was happening on the right hand side with Kulusevski. And then Madders was brilliant at initiating the press as well. So I think what we did was we just pushed them back so that they couldn't have five in the midfield when they were in attack, and they didn't know what to do, so they ended up going long. And if we think about the impact that it had on them, given that this is not a shot-shy team, Aston Villa, they're averaging, I think I'd look at it, 10.6 shots per game on and off target, about equal, 5.6 on target, 5 off target, and we limited them to 3, 1 on target at the weekend. So this is a team that scores just over 2 goals a game. So they're not shy going forwards. They've been an attacking attacking force this season. So we absolutely nullified them. They didn't know how to deal with it. They ended up going long. Mickey was sweeping up like he does, and even when Radu came on, I thought he did a fantastic job. And well, I know we're going to talk about Mickey's injury, but when he got injured, it wasn't the horror that I felt when we've only got 2 centre halves. So we've got a salute. We've got a good deputy there, I think. So overall, there was nothing in that game at any point with Villa where I was worried about it.
Stu, are you with Si on that? Was it our most controlled performance of the season rather than our best performance? And how much did before the red card, were you still confident we were going to go on and steamroll them, or did that change things for you?
I know it. A lot of at half time, as Si alluded to, a lot of people complaining, because we weren't scoring, etc. But and the XG was in Villa's favour because we weren't getting any shots off. But I thought, we came out the starting blocks on fire, pressing. Then we lost it a little bit in the middle of the first half. Then we got it back again. And it's what I said in the WhatsApp group. I think we were just that final ball off from actually really creating serious chances in that first half. And that's why I wasn't really ever worried that we weren't going to win this game. I thought, we are dominating it and we just need to get the final ball in. And, I know how good we are at finishing. So I was like, as soon as we get a chance or two. The only thing I was frustrated was when we were 2-0 up and they went down to 10 men. I was in my head. I was even shouting at the TV. I was like, "Let's push on to the goal difference," and we didn't seem to push on. I mean, the two goals we got were basically the last, in injury time and in the last minute. So that's the only bit that frustrated me. But it was a professional performance. We controlled it and didn't give them a sniff. I mean, all the talk prior to the game was Ollie Watkins. Should Kane be dropped as striker and have to play the number 10 behind him because he's the best striker in the country? He had nothing. I thought it was a really, really good performance.
Yeah, well, was it Ollie Watkins who? No, it's John McGinn who obviously got sent off with his interview before, because I saw a lot of. I know, like we're not like Tottenham because we try to get people like pitting up fans against each other, but he did have an interview because there were a lot of Villa fans basically saying this game doesn't really matter, long term, blah blah blah. We're in Europe, you're not, haha. But John McGinn before the game said something along the lines of, "We know how big this is. This is probably the biggest game in our recent history as a football club." And then they go out and 45 minutes, they haven't even had a shot on target. And we go on to absolutely obliterate them 4-0. I think that there's not like a beef with Villa as a football club. They are an awesome, proper English football club, huge fan base, etc., etc. They've traditionally played great football, great history. They've won things, blah, blah, blah. But there is a rivalry that's developing in the sense that I think Villa and Everton feel the same about us. That it's like, you hold that pretenders spot in the kind of Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United kind of area, like the top six basically, and we want where you sit. And that's where we deserve to be. And there's that, you played the last 10 years better, but we want to come and take that from you. And there's that rivalry there to kind of try and grasp that position as a football club.
I mean,
I think it's a jealousy because,
I would say that I'd say it's a bit of, I would call it more like anger at your own club for mismanagement, because like they could have done what we did. Like, we spent so much time just doing nothing, and not necessarily doing nothing, but not challenging for anything of note. Like, we were a mid-table club. We were relatively happy about it. I mean, obviously, you want more at some point, but like, we weren't throwing like a fit saying like, "Oh, like we deserve to be." I'm sure some people were, because there are some fans in every club who believe that their specific team has been ordained by God himself, and they should be the best team in the land. But most fans, I'd say, were pretty realistic about where Tottenham were. I know that the owners of the club were, and we built ourselves. It was not necessarily an easy thing to do. It took a long time. We built a stadium. We've done all of these things that have allowed us to be the current financial powerhouse, as we've talked about so many times. Financial power is just almost directly correlates to footballing power. So because we've taken that time to build that up, and now Aston Villa is kind of back in like the same like area that we were, but we're not there anymore. They miss us.
And it's also because their domestic, true local rivals are terrible and not in the same division.
That's true.
Sorry, Stu, go on.
I was going to say, I think it's just frustration because both Everton and Villa were up there before we were. So, the David O'Leary squad, when they were fighting at the top, Everton qualified for the Champions League before we did. So I think they're just frustrated because they were there before us, didn't take advantage of it. And now they see what a properly run club can do. And they're thinking that should have been us.
And we'll touch on the PSR and FFP stuff later, because I want to go back to the game in a second and discuss some of the other points. But it's just that when they were last with us in the Premier League competing in the same position to us, FFP and PSR weren't really a restriction that limited clubs. I think they've left the position and come back and gone, what the hell is all this about? Because now we've got the ceiling to break with all this regulation, as well as everything else. Like when we were last competing, that all wasn't there, so it's even harder now. But anyway, back to the game. There was a few points we'll discuss. So Van der Ven, I want to start with him. It didn't look like anything serious. So there's reports like it was a precautionary thing. But sorry, you made a comment before. I'm sure it was you when we were chatting. It was like when Van der Ven went off, you weren't panicking like you would have been previously.
It's not like when it happened at Chelsea, when you just thought, "Oh my God, what is there now?" The panic that I felt inside when he obviously was done it seriously against Chelsea, and then you found out afterwards how serious it was, how long he'd be out. there was that panic about shit. What do we do? Because that's the only solution we've got there. But I think that, and I thought he had a really solid. What did he play? 40 minutes odd, something like that. He must have played about 35, 40 minutes, was it? With the added time, he looked composed. Clearly not as fast as Mickey. There isn't anybody as fast as Mickey in the Premier League, apparently. But he did really well. He was solid. He's a lump as well. I like that in a centre half. I like a fellow who's got a bit about him. And I think he was composed. He did well. His distribution was pretty good. But the thing with Van der Ven is if he's going to be out for a longer period of time, since he's been back with Romero, it allows us to squeeze that play into the middle of the park and really dictate stuff to teams because we don't have that gap, and he plays that sweeper role so well. So, yes, I mean, you would have him in the team above Dragusin, but Laddie came in and did a decent job for the back end of that second half.
Yeah. I guess I'll talk a bit about Van der Ven doing well before we talk about his injury, because I think that his first half performance was once again just absolutely magical.
Good point, yeah.
His pace, his recovery pace is what allows us to play the system that we do as well as we can, because I think it was first 5-10 minutes of the game where Watkins had the ball after Romero misjudged the bounce and Watkins got around him, and Van de Ven from 5-10 yards back recovered by the time Watkins got within the 18 and managed to clear the ball ended up bouncing, I think, to Vicario, but managed to get the ball out from under Watkins' feet and defuse what would have been probably a goal if it's not him, realistically. Mm-hmm. And I think that happened several other times in the half too, because Villa were playing the 5-3-2. They didn't have the wingers to draw our center backs out and keep a person in the middle, so they couldn't create anything that was overly uncomfortable. So they had Watkins on one side, and I believe it was Bailey on the other side. Yep. And because of that, we could more or less we weren't necessarily man marking, but you could have Van de Ven watch one, you could have Romero watch the other, and especially if the ball ever went down our left, Van de Ven he would outrun Bailey, who's one of the other faster players in the Prem. Yeah. And then also because of his frame, just completely muscle him out of the way. It happened several times where the ball would go over the top because they had nowhere else to play because of our press. And then Van de Ven would just run it down, shield off the attacker, and then play a ball back to Vicario or Romero or whoever was open at the time.
And I mean, that's one of the potential weaknesses of the system we play, is that you sometimes get left 2-on-2 at the back. But when you've got someone as fast, when you've got somebody, the two of them work so well together. So Romero will go and attack if it comes over 2-on-2, and you've got Mickey, who's so fast that can play that recovery role, almost like a Kyle Walker plays with Man City, or used to play with Man City when he was playing on that right hand side of a three with them. He would play that fast sweeper role that would mop up at the back as well. So you feel a little bit more comfortable with Mickey in the side with that 2-on-2 that you sometimes can get exposed to with the high press.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful thing to have, and I'm really hoping that this injury isn't anything serious. I do hope it's precautionary, but I do also think that Dragusin looks fantastic in his not necessarily fantastic, but definitely a serviceable backup. Like you said, I was a little bit worried because we hadn't seen much of him, but after 5-10 minutes, there wasn't anything I was particularly worried about in terms of the drop off between
he did make. There was one moment though, wasn't there? Mistake. There was one mistake, where he really should have dealt with it a lot better, and he lost the ball in the box.
I think I know what you're talking about. I don't think that was his fault. That Vicario played him a hospital pass to the ball. The ball was bouncing, and he just tried to kick it as hard as he could, and it just happened to bounce off of. I think it was Bailey, but it may have been Diaby. One of them.
But either way, we're nitpicking, aren't we?
The ball just happened to bounce off of the player instead of going out for a goal kick like it does probably 50-60% of the time. The ball just bounced towards the box, and he couldn't get around him because I think that was McGinn at the moment, and I think that it was what ended up leading to the red card.
He was. Oh, you're gonna assist him for the red card?
Yeah,
he got the assist for the red. Okay.
He also, if we're gonna nitpick, if we're gonna nitpick those negatives, I do also want to point out that he did have one pass. I think it was in Desar, and like I have it, and like right before the 60th minute, I have the time. Like, but he just played a ball that completely cut through Villa's first two lines of defense and made it right to Desar. That ended up in a scramble situation that we didn't end up converting from. But I think that was, I'm highlighting that because one of the biggest concerns, if you look at his data only, is his passing numbers weren't the best at Genoa. And we discussed this in the past, saying that that's because of the system that Genoa play.
Yeah.
They're kind of going long. They're getting there as much as possible. And if you watch some of his games in Genoa, you'll see that kind of manifests. But it is good to see that is continuing. We're continuing to get like visual data that shows that he is actually like a competent passer, and that data isn't necessarily like.
Also, let's not get carried away. I know we
indicative.
look at Dragusin and Van der Ven, and we're like, these guys are like proper senior pros. They're 22 years old.
Exactly.
Like, they were both born after the year 2000. Like, that is mind-boggling to me that we've got two 22-year-olds who are that good already. Like, Romero's not old. He's like 26. I think he's 26, 27. He's still got 5-6 years minimum at the top, like minimum. These guys have got 10 to 14 years at the top, and they're already that level. We are blessed with centre back, and this young Croatians coming.
Stick that with Porro. 23 is he? Udogi 21.
It's insane.
And
Vicario's pretty young for a keeper.
Sarr
20. Yeah.
This has got the base of Johnson.
Yeah.
You know, we've got
Kulusevski's still 25, 24.
Yeah.
It's mental.
Yeah, we're very clearly building a team for the future. I mean, that's kind of been, we've had some misses, but we've had way more hits. And if you can hit on a player that's 19, 20, 21, like we have done, and manage to lock them down to long-term contracts like we have done for most of them, then you're set. Even if that player does end up moving to a club, you're going to get a fantastic fee for them.
Mm. And talking of
to buy other players.
Exactly. And talking about the players that are playing, so I think we're all in agreement. Van der Ven was fantastic up to the injury. The injury isn't too bad. That's good news. Dragusin was really good when he came on, but I noticed like Kulusevski, there's obviously this brilliant letter/video, depending on seeing what content you've seen going around, but just him on his performance first. I saw some negative things and I get the feedback that he's not necessarily the exact type of player you see long-term starting right wing, but to criticize someone's performance in any way who was involved with 3 goals seems a bit harsh, doesn't it, Stu? I feel a little bit like, how can this guy win?
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I think he's hurt by his initial success his first 6 months when he was scoring so many great goals, and people are expecting him to do that all the time. And the fact, his goals record isn't up there, people are like, oh, he's crap, because people just look at that, don't they? And they don't see the work rate he put in. And in the first half, he didn't have a great first half, to be honest. I didn't think. I thought Brennan Johnson was much better. But he always puts in a shift. And that second half, I mean, he was involved in 3 goals, for goodness sake. And to be honest, I thought Son, when he passed to Brennan Johnson for his goal, I thought the better pass was actually for Kulusevski. So he could have had a goal as well. So, I mean, I just thought he put in a great performance. Simple as that. But, the fans are never going to be happy, are they?
No. Talking of God, Deej.
I was just going to say to talk a little bit more about Kulusevski. I think that at some point you just have to understand that a lot of the negativity is because I think a lot of negativity, especially in games that we win 4-0, a lot of the negativity is coming from people who are dunking on the people being negative, and I think that like overhypes the negativity in a way, and so like while I will say that like obviously if you're trying to dunk on Kulusevski for being like bad or whatever, I think you need to get your eyes checked. But I think that most fans in their heart of hearts know that he's a fantastic player. And while, like you said, while he may not be what your ideal of a long-term player under Ange is, I think that at this point, he's kind of carving out his own like his own like area in the Ange system, and I think that works especially well with a wingback like Porro on that side that's more attack minded.
I think he's also, I think we've talked about it a few times on previous pods. He gives you a different option as an out as well. So he holds the ball up so well on that right hand third that he then can bring other players into the game. And he's not the winger that's going to go past people and whip a cross in. But he really does bring Porro into the game when Porro comes inside. So he'll take it wide, Porro will come inside, and then either Sarr will come into that space that Porro's left, or he'll get it into Porro. He gives you another option. So he's also the player that can come into that middle if you need to make a change on that right hand side. If Johnson was going to come on, he can slip into that number 10 role quite comfortably as well.
Do you know what it reminds me of a little bit? Do you remember when Firmino used to get loads of crap for Liverpool because he wasn't like you'd think your striker needs to score loads of goals. I know Kulusevski plays a different position, but like Klopp just said, if you can't see what else he's doing for the team, I can't help you. I went on to win the Champions League with him, right? But and there's also he's a victim of. It's only natural. We needed wing backs. We had no wing backs, and we had Conte. That was the thing. So we signed two amazing wing backs, and it was we don't have a left centre back. That's the most important thing we want. So you sign Mickey Van. We don't have a backup centre back. Okay, here's your backup centre back. We don't have a creative midfielder. Okay, here's James Maddison. And then people start to get the squad and they go, we need to replace Harry Kane. Well, Son's going to play up front. He's everyone's favourite player. All right, we need a left winger. Johnson has a great game. Who else is there left to blame? Kulusevski on the right wing. We just saw him out now. Like it also insinuates how far we've come. That arguably our best player 18 months ago, is now under the spotlight for a needs improvement from a very select few fans. That just shows how incredibly well we've done in the transfer market in recent years. But it doesn't make them right either. It's crazy to suggest that he's a problem or weak link. Although I do get that he's not like D said, naturally, aesthetically, what they see a right winger in that role to be. Like they're imagining it.
Half of it is just that he's not meta on FIFA, man. Like that's because I'm assuming that a lot of the hate is coming from younger fans because I feel like with the exception of like the Leviao thing, which is like different. I don't want to talk about it, but like I think that like towards players specifically, it feels to me like there's a propensity for like excess negativity comes mostly from younger fans, and I think that a lot of players get bailed out by being good on FIFA, and he's not one of them. I mean, it's kind of why I think it's part of the reason why I think Kane was underrated by so many people forever as well, because he's terrible. He's always been terrible at FIFA. He's not fast, and he doesn't have 5-star skills. Kulusevski's not the fastest. He's still like reasonably fast. He doesn't have 5-star skills, but he's a fantastic player. But you're not going to see that in your video game. So
actually, that's exactly what he said in his letter. He's not fast. The criticism we get, he's not fast. So it's exactly that. He doesn't have the pace on FIFA. It's not amazing. He can't run down the wing quickly.
Yeah.
Talking of who is fast, though, Brennan Johnson had a much improved performance, didn't
he? I think this is, while this may not have been our best performance of the season, I agree with the whole, like, this is definitely our most controlled performance of the season. This was his best performance of the season. I am convinced. I think that he came out, you talked about this before, but he came out looking hungry. He was, I don't want to say diving into tackles, because that would be more like what John McGinn did, but he was making Matty Cash's life a living hell in that first half specifically. That's when they were playing more of a 5-3-2. Like, they could not get the ball out down our left-hand side because Johnson was just pressing them over and over and over and over again. Obviously, some of his final balls weren't working to the level at which, like, you might have wanted, but it is important to then note that he is playing in an area where that's going to be his weaker foot sending the cross in. And he was still doing well to beat his man and get those balls in, and especially if it's on a weaker foot. One, that'll have time to develop. Two, at some point, if you're swinging a ball with a weaker foot and you're not like Son, who doesn't have a weak foot, it's just kind of going to be a bit of a crapshoot. All crosses in some way are a bit of a crapshoot, but like sometimes the ball's going to go straight to Martinez, but maybe on another day, one of those balls just finds its way to Son. I mean, I'm sure that he was looking for someone who was making a run. And I think that this was a very, very, very encouraging performance. Obviously, his goal was taken very well. I think that there. It wasn't. Once again, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, he scored. It was 1-on-1 with the keeper. He obviously is supposed to. But if you go back and rewatch the goal, I mean, Martinez is no slouch. Obviously, he didn't have the greatest performance against us. But he came out. He made himself big.
Then
He easily could have saved that on another day. But I think that finish from Johnson was fantastic and indicative of an overall fantastic game for him.
Well, look, we're gonna dive into two more players on top of that before going to the next topic. So I'm gonna give Stu, gonna give you Destiny because Destiny's your man, and the Italian league.
He's
So, no other reason. And Si, I'm gonna give you Sar. But starting with players who started on the left, who both of these next two players, Sar and Udogie. I hate to say it because it implies that I see us as beneath Real Madrid. Well, Real Madrid are twice the size as us as a football club. That's just facts. They have that Real Madrid kind of vibe that you could see them being signed as a Galactico and just becoming this superstar player. I get that vibe with both Udogie and Sar. But Udogie, just, I don't know, Stu, you just go for it. Like, his performance, leading up to that red card even, was just, wow.
Yeah. I haven't seen it, but I would love to see his heat map, especially for the first half, because he was everywhere except left back. In fact, one of the guys in one of the other chats I'm in was like, "Why is Porro playing at right back?" Because Porro was covering there, Van de Ven was covering there, but Udogie was everywhere, and he was pushing. He was brave on the ball. He was looking for the pass. I mean, he has so much confidence. And as you said, leading to that red card, he got past two players and was just putting on the afterburners before he got hacked down. I mean, he is amazing. If I was reading somewhere before about when are we going to start spending 100 million pounds on players? He is worth 100 million pounds. Madison is worth 100 million pounds. So Van is really worth 100 million pounds. He is turning into, at 20 years old, one of the best left backs in the world, and he's just signed a 6-year contract. I mean, I just can't get over how lucky we are.
Incredible. And yeah, I've been watched it on replay like 10 times. That leading up to the red card, the way he just bosses those two Villa players are trying to press him out of the game, and you just see John McGinn being like, "For goodness' sake, lads, just kick him, because that's all we can do is kick him," and that's one of the biggest compliments as a footballer. But Sar was equally in his own right. That assist, right?
Yeah, I wonder if he's becoming our most influential midfielder at the moment. In this moment, his runs, the runs that he makes through the lines, it breaks the lines so effectively. He's so powerful, and that was the run that he made for the assist. He almost fell over, but he kept going, and what a cross into Maddison. And Maddison said that they've been trying that. They work on that in training regularly. He said when he was on that run, he said, "I knew that I just had to make that run into the box. The boss tells me to make more of those runs, and I was just in the right place at the right time." But what's an absolutely sumptuous cross that was. It was absolutely beautiful. But he brings so much more to it as well. He's silky. He breaks up play really well. His distribution's excellent. Make the comparison on this podcast, but he's got a bit of the Vieiras about him, I think. That sort of like midfield general, if you like. And I think, what is he 20 or 21 at the moment? I think he's got so much in front of him. He could be whatever he wants to be. And will the Giants come sniffing for him? I'm sure they will. But if you've got someone like Ange there, does that mean that you can keep hold of some of these players if they're seeing progression year on year on year? I mean, if you look at slight tangent, but if you look at our squad now compared to the squad that Klopp had after his winter signing and first summer window, our squad is so much better than that Liverpool squad in 2016 when Klopp was about 9 months into his tenure. you look at some of the players. I was just looking at it online before we came on here, and it's like I don't even know some of the players that were there. And I think that we've got the starting of something a bit special here. Another couple of signings, another 2 or 3 good signings in the summer to really bolster the either strengthen the first team and therefore bolster the bench or bring in as competition. I mean, you're looking at some of the players that they had in Liverpool, and Alberto Moreno, Dejan Lovren, Nathaniel Klein, Simon Mignolet. These players, and they were being held up as a side that's on the up. And I think what will happen is you'll look back on this squad in 3 or 4 years' time, and you'll be like, yeah, they were good then, but look at the quality of the players that we've been managed to attract now.
Yeah, it's chalk and cheese. I remember referring to Mignolet as Mignolet back in the day because he was terrible. But
very grown up, James.
very grown
up.
Yeah.
Of course.
About
Can't have the second on
Sarr,
time.
I was going to say about Sarr, he apparently he models his game on Yaya Toure, who obviously was with us, I think, when he first
Interesting.
That is
And
interesting.
I can see that as well, the way that you can see
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of elegant dominance of the
I wanted to add that I think that the way that he was used in this game particularly was really interesting because, I mean, normally we've talked about this because of the way that our fullbacks invert. We need a release valve out wide, and he is usually the one who accomplishes that role, especially on the right. But in this game, because of the way that Villa's pressing system, or I guess kind of lack of pressing system for a while, was set up to basically completely ignore our center backs for the most part and try to cut off our single pivot in Bissouma and take away all of his passing options except for backwards. I think it was really interesting in the second half that Sarr was used a lot more as almost a secondary pivot.
Right.
And I was able to both allow him more freedom and then also allow Bissouma more freedom. And I think that the game really opened up when we started to do that. And it's just a testament to how versatile that he is, that he can play both of those roles really well and still end up on the wing somehow to send in a perfect ball to Madison.
Yeah.
My favourite thing about him, though, is when you watch world-class players play, if it's like Ronaldo or something like that, they play in such like a miserable, serious face, whereas Sarr just seems so content and happy. Like, I remember when he was under that shitty Conte era, when it must have been the most terrible, toxic atmosphere, and even Conte's going, yeah, he's actually really good, isn't he? Well, I have to be nice about him. Like, yeah, Sarr's good. And Sarr's just there, just like in the training photos, just looking really happy with the odd 10 minutes off the bench when he really should be starting games ahead of the players, starting ahead of him. And every manager's come and said the same thing. He's had an incredibly great work ethic and training. And he stood out above all the rest in that sense. And he just looks like he's enjoying the opportunity, and just every game gets that 2-3% stronger. And you just go,
Wonderful player.
Yeah.
Wonderful player.
But on topic of players who were members of the squad or were members of the squad,
but
clearly Skip.
Can I just talk about one player before we talk about who was or wasn't there? Shout out to Son. I mean,
I was going to
what a
say,
performance by him. Couple of assists and a goal. I mean, what?
Yeah, but he's so good. You just take it for granted now, right?
It shows how good our team is that we have been praising players all game, and we haven't brought up the person who had a goal and 2 assists.
Yeah, but then we haven't even mentioned PEH yet for that little shimmy and feint. And where's that been?
Oh, it's beautiful. Thought it was Yaya Toure for a minute there.
Oh, it's like Ronaldinho, wasn't it?
Johan Cruyff.
Incredible.
I think I made a face when that happened live.
It's brilliant, man. It's brilliant.
That, and then obviously also shout out to Timo Werner for scoring again. If he can continue scoring, then
that was a confident finish as well. That comes from last week.
Yep.
Very.
I think I completely agree. I think that a couple weeks ago, I think that he probably puts that at Martinez's feet.
But or he takes a touch and tries to control it, but first time, bang.
Yep.
Beautiful.
If we can get him confident, man, I am potentially even more excited than I already have been about this team.
Yeah, I can't actually. Thing is, just get me so excited about this team is going into this beginning of this transfer before we signed Ange, everyone, I was thinking, God, we've got 6 or 7 positions to sort here. Now I'm like, Rodrigo Bentancur is going to struggle to win his spot back. Like someone like Dragusin, who would be buzzing for, can't get is a bench player for us. Like Udogi's our wing back, and Real Madrid would bite our hands off for him. And I guess I'm like, how are Pedro Porro and Dejan Kulusevski coming into a conversation of maybe not being as good as the other players on the pitch when they are insanely, like, incredible footballers? Just the level of the squad is just, well, left wing is our weakest position, let's be honest. But still, I just can't, words can't even do it. This squad we built so quickly. Add 2 or 3 more depth from that, and we are laughing.
I think
left
you need
wing's
to
our weakest position, but we have a loan option that we could get 15 million that scored in the last 2 games. We have Brennan Johnson who played there at his best game of the season. We have Son who would probably normally play there if our number 9 that we hated but is now in form is playing. I think like that, and that's still, I would probably agree that that's our weakest position. I'm just the context of what the weakest position now versus weakest position.
Yeah,
like even at the start of the season, it's night and day.
Yeah, I think now the job is over the next 2 transfer windows. Then is to look at where you've got the biggest drop off in quality in each of the positions. So you've got Udogie, right? Now Daves can come in and do a job, but that's a big drop off in quality. Yeah, you've got Porro and you've got Emerson. Now, and as much as we love Royale, we've talked about how much we love him, and it's not a slating of him, but this isn't the system for him. He plays in the back 4 at a right back, and he's solid that way. So you need to get somebody in. So I think there's a few positions where we need to say, right, how do we up the bench strength so that we don't have that drop off?
Exactly.
That's the challenge now. I think the midfield is fairly solid, but I could see Højbjerg, Skip moving on in the summer. I think that that's probably on the cards, right? And Lo Celso moving on in the summer. So then it's about how do you replenish that and make sure that you're closing the gap between your first choice and your backup.
Yeah, and like we said,
Aratici is looking for wonderkids as we speak.
Yes, but as we said, Hill and Skip didn't even make the bench, so they seem to be so far down the pecking order now that it's logical they're going to be sold. We knew this with Skip. I can see why people would be like, "Don't sell him. He's academy. He's got a role to play." But he doesn't, though, does he? He's pure financial fair play profit, PSR profit, because he's an academy product, and you can probably get a good fee for him, and he'll go do well at a club.
Get him to Leicester. Get him hooked up with Winks again. He'll do a job in somewhere like Leicester or Norwich or.
He's above that. I think he's above Winks level for me. He's more. I hate to say it. If they weren't West Ham, I'd like to see him at a club at that kind of level where they're in the top half of the table, pushing the big 6 to get the odd Europa League swan day.
I think that he'll probably stay more because of Champions League qualification requirements, because he's club trained, and club trained spots are basically worth their weight in gold because it's really hard to get a club trained player. I think Sar is going to be club trained, and obviously even a player like Udogie, we got 19, 20, is not going to be club trained. I don't believe, at least. So I think that he definitely will become more of an emergency backup at best. I think that I think he'll probably hang around for that reason until we get potentially some other players who can fill those slots.
But
because, like I said, if you don't have a club trained player in the a club trained player in the Champions League, that spot has to stay empty. And while that seems fine now, if we get to a point next season where Bentancur has another injury, heaven forbid, Højbjerg or Højbjerg's replacement gets injured, then you're all of a sudden your depth in midfield is starting to lack, and that's where someone like him can be incredibly important.
But you still have, it's worth noting on that, though, that you are allowed 25 players in a Champions League squad, which leaves you with...
too many. But never have too many.
I agree, but it means you've got a bench of 7 plus 7 more. I think it all depends, isn't it? It's like, if no one comes in with a great offer for him, keep him. It makes sense. If you get a really strong offer, it makes sense to also reinvest that. I think maybe that's the way.
He needs to be
So you'd probably
playing.
let Højbjerg and Lo Celso go first, then, wouldn't you?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's going to be the last midfielder that goes, is what I'm saying. I think he'll probably be moved on eventually. I do not think it'll be this summer or probably even next summer.
It also depends what our ambitions are in the transfer market, right? Because as we said, he's the pure profit by selling him, and we are the latest numbers have come out today.
We
And
do not need to worry about that.
Oh no, Kieran Maguire's done it. We're actually quite close to the buffer. In the new rules that are being fast tracked, we're actually quite close to the buffer because where we're really safe now, when you're in Europe, you're only allowed to spend 70% of your revenue on salaries, and we've got less wiggle room than we would have if we weren't in Europe, obviously. So there is a need to suddenly, if you can't offload Lo Celso, and we won't have to offload on AA, that's the big issue, isn't it? Because he's on the biggest
Was he
wages.
200 a week?
200.
Yeah.
200 a week.
So you've still got a lot of dead wood. You've still got Sessegnon and
Hill.
Hill.
I wouldn't call Højbjerg deadwood.
But he's not. Yeah, he's not an issue. But I mean, there's still 6 or 7 players on decent salaries that are stopping you from making a signing like Van der Ven again. You know, the next summer, like that £50 million plus signing, or potentially making it more difficult, I should say. So I think Skip maybe is the emergency chord rather than the first option. But yeah, on that we did probably want to just talk about the new PSR and FFP rules, what they mean for Spurs. So the new rules are basically, so first to clarify, FFP and PSR are different. If you don't know the difference, FFP is a UEFA rule for clubs in Europe, and PSR, Profit Sustainability Regulation, is a rule for FA. It's an FA. Basically, any club that's FA registered, so clubs in the English leagues, basically, that are officially registered. They were different rules. So FFP, you could only spend a maximum of 85% of your revenue on wages. But with the PSR, it was different. You had to avoid a loss of 105. You could only lose up to £105 million over 3 years, but there were caveats to that. That only £15 million of that 105 million could be the club's money. So the owners were allowed to invest, what's that? So that's 90 million over 3 years to offset losses. But if your club lost without that ownership involvement, £15 million or more, you would get punished. So anyway, the rules were different and confusing. So they brought the rules together. So now it's going to be a similar model. It's going to start at 80% for clubs that aren't in Europe, 85%, and 70% for clubs that are in Europe. So to kind of give a bit of a cushion for those not in Europe to be able to challenge, but it kind of doesn't make sense because as soon as you get up there, you're going to drop your wages to stay in there. So I guess that's part of the anti-competitive thing. But the big thing anyway, that's to flag, is in those rules, they've changed the punishments. So clubs that break these rules are no longer facing point deductions unless they breach them on multiple occasions or of a superior level of severity. So what they're basically doing is giving certain clubs a lot more wiggle room to say you can break these rules, just don't break them by too much. And for other certain clubs, we know that have state ownership and stuff, this does give them a bit more room to say, I'm just going to smash it this year, then be a good boy for a couple of years after that. But what does it mean for Spurs? It's still good for us. If you have more revenue, you benefit from FFP and PSR. And we have more revenue than the majority of teams in the Premier League. So we get an overall benefit versus the majority, but we are still at a disadvantage versus someone like Man United, who just have obscenely high revenues and can just, go above and beyond that spend. But yeah, that's the summary. Any other comments, boys, you want to add before we end?
I am not an accountant, so I will take your word on everything you just said. But I think that regardless of what the new rules are, I think that the way that our club is run, that we will be able to be competitive in the transfer market because a lot of it is, like you said, it's based on income, right, and revenue.
Yeah.
Which, because of the way that our club is set up, to not just have a revenue stream from football, but also from outside sources like concerts and stuff like that. I think that's going to be a huge boon for us in the future because with the numbers where we may be closer to the limit, that is also with our stadium just starting to get kicked into gear. if you will. So that number's only going to continue to go up. Obviously not forever, but it'll get to a place that's higher than it is now.
Mhm.
I think because I know that we've applied for hosting more concerts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And those make a decent chunk of money for the club as well. So
Yeah.
setting our club up to be, setting our stadium in particular up to be the way that it is has been a very good thing.
According to Kieran Maguire's post, we spent a net spend over the last 3 years of £275 million, which gives us the fourth highest net spend in the league, fifth highest behind Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea.
Seeing 5.
But it's not taking into account last year's figures, is it? Because we haven't released our
Correct.
annual report.
Correct. So these are all a bit hearsay because the accounts are a year behind everything else, and we will probably be third or second in the next one. But anyway, we have headroom. They're estimating, based on the rules, of 35 million to spend in the summer.
But
That's guesstimates, though.
I think isn't that I thought that was the headroom that we have like before taking into account like current revenue.
Well, here's why it's different for us, and he goes on to explain this. The reasons, like Spurs still are good, right? They're still the sixth most headroom in the league. The most headroom in the league is Man City with 74 million. Shock, they found some new sponsorship deals. Wow. But even Man United only have £65 million headroom. So we're not like miles off the pace. And Newcastle have to raise 39 million. Fulham have to raise 37 million. Aston Villa have to raise 34 million. Nottingham Forest have to raise 16 million. The list goes on. West Ham have to raise money, and Leeds have to raise. So we're doing really well. But the reason ours is lower than expected when we were expected really high is because we've been out of Europe this year. So we were at 85%, and now we've got to drop into the 70% bracket because it looks like we're going to qualify for Europe. And they factored that into this calculation.
But surely qualifying for Europe, I mean, if we get Champions League, that's what, 50 million extra revenue. So it kind of counterbalances that 15% that we have to lose.
But you get it in the next years of accounts. So you kind of have to, you don't get it straight away, do you? So because you're being, your budget is based on the previous year spends, but for something, you're basically always 2 years behind.
Can't we? If I'm understanding that correctly.
Correct. You could, as long as you're not breaking it by too much, the only punishment is a luxury tax. So I wonder who that benefits the most. It's going to be obviously Newcastle, Man City.
Yeah.
And yeah.
This is just a way to fast track those. I mean, we'll be able to be competitive still in spending. I don't think that we need to worry about raising any funds. We're not going to be in the position that someone like Aston Villa are because we just have a higher net revenue than they do. But it is a bit frustrating, obviously, to, quote unquote, do things the right way. And then as soon as you get to a point where you can start to compete with the big teams, the rules just change to benefit them more. And I mean, obviously, we probably voted for this if this went through, so I'm assuming that there's at least some measure of benefit for us. But
we've got the 8th most revenue according to this Deloitte Money League in the world. So
yeah,
we're fine. We're definitely much bigger benefactors than we are losers of this situation. Chelsea have less revenue than us. Like they're going to be more of a knock than we are. So, but anyway, boys, we better look in there. We'll try squeezing a little Fulham preview pod, maybe Thursday or Friday.
Cool.
Win those. We'll finish off with time to dream, guys. You can close your eyes.
The next 4 or 5 games are so big, Jim. The next 4 or 5 before we hit that trio of games towards the back end of April and May, we've got to nail these next 4 or 5.
I'm just saying, if we beat Fulham, Luton, West Ham, and Forest, entirely plausible.
Newcastle and Chelsea.
It's not ridiculous to say we're within 4 points off the title with City and Arsenal to play.
It's in our hands, already, isn't it?
I went to put a bet down at 200-1 odds and Spurs win the league. I put the max bet down, which was £25 apparently. Because do you know why they limited that bet? Because they know it's going to happen.
Right?
They know it's going to happen.
Because you're a high roller, Jim. You're a high roller. You get points everywhere you go.
My only bet this year is £25 on Spurs win the league. So go on, Ange. Take me on holiday. Right. Up the Spurs, boys.
Go on, you Spurs.